Welcome to Terran Tandem's Octerrorfest. All month long, we'll be celebrating the horrifying delights of the spookiest month, October. Prepare yourself for the episodes that frighten and delight in your spine as we chill you to the bone. You can find us on YouTube and Instagram at Terran Tandem, and you'll always find our latest episode on our website, terrantandem.com.
Why do we think October's the spookiest month?
It's been like built that way.
Do you think it's Halloween?
Oh, I think it's Samhain.
Oh, okay.
And Halloween and the harvest moon and
pumpkin spice.
The pumpkins. Ghosts.
Do people really like pumpkin spice?
Yeah.
Like really? Like genuinely?
Yeah, people love it. I think people that love pumpkin pie and stuff are the ones that love pumpkin spice. Pumpkin bread. I think it's fine. I think people who like pumpkin tend to be gorgeous.
With the D.
Yeah.
I get it.
I mean, I like squash.
No, I
like squash and zucchini.
There's a certain like mania to it each year.
Because it only comes round.
It's like the McRib.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Except I don't think pumpkin spice is nearly as bad for you as the meat made in a computer.
Yeah, no, in a nightmare.
Computer-generated
The Simpsons
meat.
had the best take on the McRib.
Yeah.
They had discontinued the crusty rib burger or whatever because the animal it came from went extinct, and it's not a pig.
Think about all of those episodes of, those Simpsons October Treehouse of Horror.
Yeah, Treehouse of Horror. I always really liked how at the beginning of Treehouse of Horror they had to have Marge come out and explain that it's like very, very scary for kids.
Yeah.
And that's just quaint now.
Well, one of our
considering like what we're watching.
One of our Octerrorfest recommendations, episodes for Octerrorfest,
which we do recommend,
is going to be the best Halloween episodes of TV. Not necessarily horror.
No.
It's going to be a little departure from talking about horror, where we just talk about the best Halloween episodes.
Well, that's the other side of Halloween is festivity and celebration. And honestly, my favorite Halloween episodes, most of them might come from one show. Now that I'm thinking about it.
I know. I would pick one show.
Richard and Laura doing podcasts.
Yeah. Anyway. My words were failing me.
Oh, well, my brain's failing me. So we make a pair. What are we doing today, y'all? I said, what's we doing today, y'all?
That's terrible.
Come on down.
That is not just what we're going to talk about, actually.
Oh.
Well, the title of this episode is Hillbilly Horror.
Yes.
But it is a little typecasty, and we're not going to just talk about like what is traditionally known as a hillbilly, because that is a USA
True. Yeah.
term.
I mean,
and I'm going international with some of mine.
It just has a nice ring to it. But we're really talking about rural horror. See how hard that is to say? You say that.
Rural juror.
Yeah, exactly.
I have some tips and tricks on how to know what hillbilly horror is.
I'd appreciate it as a city slicker myself.
So here are some takeaways for hillbilly horror. Like, why do you know that you're watching a horror movie that can be considered in this subgenre?
Okay.
It's typically takes place in a remote, isolated setting.
Yes. And, one that seems to be technologically behind the times.
Yeah. Backwoods, mountains, swamps, rural farmland.
Off the grid.
Yes. Places where outsiders are typically unwelcome and law enforcement is absent or useless.
Yeah.
Which could be anywhere.
Absent. They're certainly everywhere now.
The isolation of it all And the reason why it makes it kind of a scary element is that the isolation makes people feel vulnerable.
Yeah, it's the stripping away.
No one is going to hear you scream.
All the protections and comforts of civilization. The reason that we first banded together and formed groups and then formed villages and settlements and cities and all that stuff is you take all of that away, like immediately. It happens very quickly.
Another characteristic is the civilized outsiders, and I use that civilized in quotes.
Who is the real civilized?
Versus the savage locals. And again, I use savage in quotes. So it's outsiders versus locals.
Yeah. Inside versus outside.
Typically, it's the outsiders that venture into a rural area either by accident or as a joke or because they know they're not supposed to.
Or if they're gentrifiers, like that's kind of a big thing too.
Yeah. If you think of that movie, in the Mayan ruins, The Ruins.
The book by Scott Smith.
Yeah. That it could be considered outsiders versus locals.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Hillbilly Horror contains one of my favorite tropes. It's not exclusive to Hillbilly Horror. It's the I am somewhere I do not belong.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of it because you'll see in the examples we'll get into, a recurring theme, at least for me, is right at the beginning, someone tells them don't go there.
Yeah, or there's some kind of
obvious
things don't feel right at the beginning.
It's not that the characters are stupid; it's that they deliberately ignore either a explicit warning or a bunch of signs,
or they're just there, vacationing. This isn't
like
always
you ever driven through a place
a
and felt like maybe you shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
West Virginia.
There's also a usually strong us versus them dynamic. Usually the locals are a little more brutal and primitive, and the outsiders are naive and somewhat, helpless until they aren't.
It's interesting. It's definitely a genre that started, it literally started as an exploitation. We'll get into the history of it in a second, but it's something that over the years, like any long-running trope, has been flipped over. I would say there are aspects of some hillbilly horror, rural horror, that's definitely look at these mutant weirdos that live in a holler. And then there's some that frame them a little bit more sympathetically of look at these people that, us quote unquote civilized folk have marginalized and turned into beasts.
Well, one of the next characteristics is the grotesque or deformed villain. Sometimes hillbilly horror has a tendency to be inbred, mutilated, or deformed.
Yeah, that's the exploitative nature of it. There's it kind of reminds me of old-timey freak shows. But and how in modern times that's very distasteful.
In some of the examples I'm going to give, because you can be deformed physically, but you can also be mentally deformed.
Yes.
There could, and I don't mean slow-witted. I mean you could have sadist tendencies, or you could be a true villain.
Yes.
And you do it all in effort to keep outsiders out.
There's also definitely that element of resistance to change.
Yeah.
The presence of an outsider in a tightly controlled, isolated environment introduces the chaos of change, of new things. And there's the struggle of preservation of a way of life, of a culture. That culture might be, fucking your siblings and eating people, but it's still the way it
it could be their method of
there's
survival.
There's a lot of that in
too,
these movies, I'm saying.
Which the kind of survival tone of these films as well. Sometimes survival of the locals focuses on, tormenting the outsiders, either hunting them or torturing them, sometimes, playing games with them. Other times it's more of a survival focus on what the locals do to survive, which is cannibalism, maybe incest, and taking the outsiders as meat to survive.
Yeah, that's such a hard word to use when you're talking about humans, meat. But that does also play a big role, eating people.
It
I don't know.
Eating people. And
you'd think like living in the woods and shit, there'd be lots of game, but they do eat people.
Yeah. I mean, again, there's that kind of another aspect is that moral ambiguity.
Yeah.
Of, they're doing this because this is their territory. And that's justified.
It just always makes me think of Barbra Streisand when she sang "People who eat people are the luckiest people on earth." It's really beautiful.
One other thing I just wanted to say is,
tasted.
Oftentimes there's low tech violence.
Oh yeah, it's very
like rudimentary,
brutal, like farm
weapons,
tools, blunt objects. Yeah, there's that's the animal savagery aspect of it. Of like, there are guns sometimes.
Fight with what you have.
Yeah, it's usually like a board with a nail in it or something.
Now that's just kind of the major characteristics.
And everyone's covered in grime.
Yeah,
sweat and dirt.
That's just the major characteristics of most hillbilly horror, and some of the elements that are prevalent in a majority of those. Some of the things we might be talking about today might not have all of them, might have one or two of them, but still kind of fit in that it's the us versus them. It's the often a classism, poverty, division, xenophobia. It's a lot of those elements playing into it as well.
Yeah.
So you said you were going to talk a little bit about the history.
Sure.
How this trope came to be.
Well, I think the earlier examples of hillbilly horror are certainly exploitative. They have their roots in the shocking, look at what happens when normal, quote unquote, people go into those deep, dark woods. One of the earlier examples of the genre in film is probably 1964's 2000 Maniacs by pretty much the inventor of the splatter genre, Herschel Gordon Lewis. So fresh off of his classic Blood Feast. And by the way, if you have never seen these movies, they're hilarious. They are low budget 60s, super duper gory movies, but the blood's like really bright. It's that like 60s blood. But nobody was doing things like this way back then. And he was pretty controversial. So anyway, 2000 Maniacs is like a bunch of people get invited to this southern village. And it turns out those people are still real mad about the Civil War. So they take it out on them. And that, I think, is the beginning of where this comes from is, quote unquote coastal elites making movies about Confederates, about backwards people. This is really just a sort of cycle that never ended after the Civil War. The era of Reconstruction was cut short. You have this rise of making fun of Southern people and rural people, of demeaning them, of exploiting them with people coming in from the Northeast into West Virginia and buying up the coal mines and stuff like that. And then, you have this sort of reaction in the opposite direction that you see in the 80s and 90s of like the glorification of quote unquote redneck culture. And that's continued to the present day,
Well, if you think about kind of the idea of a civilized versus non-civilized or kind of othering, it's been going on forever.
Absolutely.
All over the world, not just in the U.S. But I think the Southern Gothic writers that, think about William Faulkner, not a horror writer, but he did create characters that had
Rose for Emily,
kind of dark undertones. Sure. And then Flannery O'Connor, who really did explore this hillbilly horror trope.
And the dark origins of this is certainly just the age-old tale of otherization.
Yeah, exactly.
Of dehumanizing through propaganda your perceived opponent so that, it makes it easier to commit atrocities if you don't think of them as human. That is certainly like the dark story of grouping any type of person together and painting them as villains. It's certainly controversial. Now, the exploitation element of American hillbilly horror makes it a little bit more campy and fun, especially in H.G. Lewis's film. But that's followed up pretty quickly by, I would say, what is the preeminent example and the kicker of the trend. And it's the one I'm going to start off talking about in depth. Of course, what I'm talking about is 1972's Deliverance, directed by John Boorman. Wow, John Boorman was such a fascinating filmmaker. He did The French Connection 2, which is amazing. He did Deliverance, which is amazing. Then he did The Exorcist 2, which is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life, like to a hilarious degree. Just a real cool, like interesting, weird dude. And Deliverance is a stone cold classic. Now, it's based on the novel by James Dickey, which I've also read and is amazing. Now, James Dickey, as an aside, I got into his work because, oh man, I think in like the early 2000s or late 90s, there was a rumor that the Coen brothers were going to adapt his novel To the White Sea with Brad Pitt. And I was like, holy fuck. I mean, I was, 18, 19 years old, like crazy into the Coen brothers, obviously. So I read that book and then I read Deliverance. And they ended up actually never making that movie, unfortunately. It would have been so cool. I hope somebody does because the book is incredible. So that's To the White Sea. But we are talking Deliverance. Now, Deliverance is about a group of friends. They're suburbanites, city folk.
City folk. Like
rich, 70s style yuppie types. And quite a cast. It is Burt Reynolds and Jon Voight, ambassador to Hollywood, his honorable Jon Voight. And it's the film debut of Ned Beatty and Ronnie Cox. Beloved Ned Beatty was Otis in the old Superman movies.
He was always old.
In everything. He's so good. I loved him so much. And Ronnie Cox, of course, still with us. The bad guy from RoboCop and so many wonderful things. Anyway, basic story. The friends go on a white water rafting trip in Appalachia. And they run into... bunch of hillbillies. Yeah, mountain folk. And it's very much a case of these folk are very aggrieved at even the sight of, these pretty, handsome, well-to-do, well-fed, healthy, all their teeth, these like...
come into their land to have fun.
To have fun, to just fuck around. And on the one side, a large reason why so much of Appalachia is impoverished has to do with exploitative business practices from carpetbagging corporations. So the anger is quite real. On the other hand, these idiots didn't do any of that. They were just there trying to have a good time. So this movie contains some of the most iconic and famous scenes, I would say, in cinema history, that even if you haven't seen the movie, you are you're somewhat aware. Tertiarily. You are somewhat aware in some place that help. You are somewhat aware of certain aspects of the movie. Of course, Dueling Banjos.
That won a Grammy.
It did. It's very famous. I heard Dueling Banjos like a decade before I ever was old enough to see this movie.
The instrumental composition won a Grammy for Best Country Instrumental Performance.
And it is featured in this movie with two real weird looking folks playing it. So there's a whole scene where one guy's on the guitar, other dude, the little like redhead guy, is on the banjo, and they are shredding those motherfuckers. So the other one is the extremely graphic and difficult to watch rape scene of Ned Beatty, in which the hillbilly dominates him and humiliates him, forcing him to squeal like a pig, telling him he's purty, and dehumanizing him in a way that you can only sense is very, very pleasing to do to a Yankee. So it's a very graphic and difficult to watch scene, and it really hammers home. I mean, John Boorman was an exemplary filmmaker and very, very tough, but it's one of those things you can't unsee it. Now this starts, a cat and mouse and a survival and Burt Reynolds,
which is pretty much a very key element to hillbilly horror type movies.
Survival, yes, where
then it's
the
forcing
civilized
the outsiders to become brutal.
That is my favorite aspect of one of my favorite tropes within this genre, this subgenre, is the civilized. It has no other choice to uncivilize themselves to live. Now, by the end of it, they can no longer be considered civilized people based on the things they've done.
Right.
Maybe they had to.
And that's
often
that moral
they did,
ambiguity.
But can you really go back to the country club after you've bashed some guy's brains in with your bare hands in a rock? No. Now, one thing I do want to mention also about Deliverance, this is one of the most incredible stories out of Hollywood. So there's a famous scene in which Burt Reynolds, he like escapes from the hillbillies, and his character goes over a waterfall. Mm-hmm. And they were going to throw a dummy over because nobody wanted to throw Burt Reynolds over a goddamn waterfall. He's the greatest.
He's just getting started.
Yeah, he's like one of the greatest, sexiest action heroes.
We wouldn't have had Smokey and the Bandit.
Oh, well, let me finish the story. So Burt Reynolds goes, I'm not doing that. That looks stupid. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Everyone says, please don't do this. The insurance company is like, do not do this. Burt Reynolds insists. So they film him going over the falls, Burt Reynolds himself. And he smashes into just about every rock on the way down, batters up his body, breaks most of the bones, and ends up in traction in hospital very seriously. And when he wakes, here's how Burt Reynolds tells the story. When he woke up, Boorman was in the room. And and now obviously this is a bit of Hollywood lore, but he said to John Boorman,
did you get this?
How did it look?
Yeah.
And John Boorman says, Burt, it looked like a fucking dummy. So, obviously Burt Reynolds recovered, went on to have, a magnificent career and then an incredible revival, in the Boogie Nights era.
And John Boorman also recovered because he went on to film one of my favorite movies of all time, Excalibur.
He did. Now, I'm telling John Boorman's filmography, there are just... And I ragged on The Exorcist too, and it is a bad movie, but it's a bad movie that takes big, big swings. It really goes at it. It's not like it's lazy. It is not lazy. It just doesn't work because it is utterly absurd. But he swings for the fences. I deeply admire the mad genius of John Boorman. I absolutely recommend checking out more of his movies. But anyway, Deliverance is a magnificent book. It's an excellent movie. It's tense. It was one of the most intense and raw films of that had been, post Hays Code. So it's a tough watch, but it's a classic for a reason. And it does it's the granddaddy of this genre.
Well, I'm going to stamp my passport and hop on a long flight away from Appalachia to the Australian outback, middle of nowhere.
Australia has its own very proud tradition of outback horror, often known as Ozploitation.
Yes.
And it has some of the tropes, but I will say the thing I've noticed missing from Ozploitation horror, inbreeding.
Yeah, it's the inbreeding, and
that seems to be a pretty American thing.
The classist, anger, the entitlement, the rudimentary brutality, and also the switch that happens with the victims to then becoming survivalists and becoming violent themselves. This is very prevalent in my example of the movie I'm going to talk about.
I would say one fascinating through line between both Australian and American hillbilly horror is, even in viewing the quote unquote backwards people in the woods, often the antagonists of the films, right? They are being invaded by outsiders, but they themselves are colonizers. White Australians in the outback colonized that land and kicked out the indigenous.
Right.
American whites in Appalachia colonized that land and murdered the indigenous. So it's interesting because you're watching like second generation colonization and the trauma from it. This is like a little bit depressing, but it's just a wheel that keeps turning.
Yeah. Well, this isn't
I
so
can always
much
count on me for that.
So much of an invasion as it is a taking. So, this movie made a huge impact on me and my future interest in horror movies.
Yes, I'm so excited.
It's called Fortress, and it's from 1986. It's actually came out in 85 on HBO, but 86 in the theater. Not in our local theaters, but in Australia. And it has horror elements, although it is dubbed a thriller. And it's part of the Ozploitation cinema, which you mentioned. And it does have the elements of hillbilly horror.
It's a later entry. It's actually on the waning end of the heyday of that genre.
Yeah.
Although it made a roaring comeback in the 2000s with Wolf Creek.
And as I mentioned, hillbilly horror is usually a U.S. term, like a United States term. So this does have those elements to it. It's starring Rachel Ward, and some of the characters' names are Dabby Duck, Father Christmas, Pussycat, Mac the Mouse, and then a bunch of kids.
Yeah, because they're like scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Masked kidnappers. So the film takes place in the remote countryside of Australia, and it depicts a teacher who has like a one-room classroom who teaches all ages, and the kids are kidnapped by these masked gunmen, and then they're held captive in the remote woods near the school. And they're being ransomed for, I don't really remember how much, but they have to fight back in order to survive. And the film itself is loosely based on the 1973 Faraday School kidnapping of a teacher and her class, where escaped convicts held them for $1 million ransom. The cons got caught, but then escaped and did the same thing again. Kidnapped a teacher, held for ransom, and then they were ultimately captured. Also, this kidnapping scene, I think from a Clint Eastwood movie, I don't know which one, Kids on the Bus, something like that, Kidnap Kids on the Bus, was loosely based on the Faraday School kidnapping as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, Sally, played by Rachel Ward, is the teacher who is trying to protect the kids, but also needs to create killers out of them. They're the only way to survive is to kill. They found that out very quickly, that the kids need to basically turn into warriors, like Lord of the Rings style.
Yeah, which is
Lord of the Flies style.
Which is the official FBI training on active shooter is run, hide, fight.
Yeah.
That's actually part of it, like turn into a warrior and
they create spears, they create traps, they try to turn the wilderness that they know pretty well on their captors, which is a little bit of a twist of the genre. I will say
coming
that
out way before Home Alone.
It's very tense and it's very brutal. There is a scene where they have to swim out of this cave, and the swim is so long and so difficult, and they have to hold their breath for so long.
It's like that
under this huge rock.
Like when Shelley Winters is swimming through the Poseidon Adventure, that long tunnel. Yeah, it's very anything where you have to swim underwater through like. Ugh.
And not everybody survives.
And not everybody's Tom Cruise and can hold their breath for 19 minutes.
Nope. Kate Winslet held it for longer. So let's give her the credit. 21 minutes.
21 minutes? You can't hold your breath for 21
Look
minutes.
it up. Fact check me.
I am. You keep going.
You said he did it for 19?
That was a joke.
Look
Nobody
it
can
up.
hold their breath for that long.
Well, while he looks that up, it might not be 21 minutes, but I know she just beat his record a couple of years ago.
7 minutes. 21 minutes? Like, whoa, what are you...
She beat it, though.
Yeah. Maybe there's some, like, weird...
Well, how long
there's
did
some,
he
like,
hold
incredible 110-year-old monk on a mountain.
How long did he hold it, and when did she beat
6 minutes.
him?
He did 6 minutes in Mission Impossible. She did 7 minutes for...
that Swimmers movie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's intense, man. Jeez. Oh, for Avatar.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway,
7 minutes, 15 seconds.
Not everybody survives, and there is some brutal revenge and survival taken out on these captors.
This later inspired my an early 1992 favorite of Young Richard, Toy Soldiers.
Yeah, that's a good one, but that has
movie.
Nothing to do with
Starring
Hillbilly Horror.
Current president of SAG, Sean Astin.
Yeah, it
Hell
sure
yeah.
does.
Congrats.
So anyway, Fortress, it's an old one. It's a good one.
It's awesome.
It definitely has a lighter touch.
It's got a very beautiful Rachel Ward.
It also doesn't have the, as I'll talk about in a couple of my later examples, the really gross, exploitive, I don't know. It's not racist, but it's like...
It's not kind.
No, when you're talking about hillbillies and the inbreeding and the incest and like how gross it gets and like really distasteful. It doesn't have any of those elements. This is really a straightforward thriller, a survival, a what would you do to survive, and it does have those elements of what we talked about.
Yes, and it really depends culturally on the moment. I know the examples you're talking about, and the 2000s were a time of like edgelord shocking for the purpose of being shocking.
Yeah, my next two examples, one that is fine and that does all of the things that I just said are negative, and then one that's really good and doesn't do any of them and is wildly successful. So why don't we take a break and come back and talk about the rest of our movies. Looking to add some excitement to your Halloween party? Want to add some frights to the night? Well, look no further. Hire Brian. Brian can handle all of your wishes for a hauntingly good time for any style of party you might be hosting. Need a scary clown? Hire Brian. Want a secret stalker to scare trick-or-treaters? Brian is your man. Mad scientist? Scarecrow? Masked monster? Brian is up for all of it. Since completing his stint in a disreputable penitentiary, Brian has been fine-tuning his abilities to morph into what you need him to be, living up to his given nickname on the block, the Chameleon of Chaos. Brian is cheap, sometimes coming into your home for free. Brian will come and go as he pleases, sometimes without your knowledge. How easy is that? Depending on what you need Brian to do, he may add some of his own unique flair. Brian has a way of sticking with you, so tell your friends. We are not responsible for any damage, death, or dismemberment that Brian may or may not cause. Just go with it. Hire Brian. If you don't, he may show up anyway. This is a fake ad for a fake product and a horror-themed podcast. We do not condone nor endorse what Brian does that might be immoral or illegal.
I don't know if I told you this, but you got a real purty mouth. I think it's me that gets to go next.
What's your next?
Sorry about that creepy hillbilly that came in and said weird stuff. My next example of hillbilly horror is I'm going to go with one of the absolute greats, but warning, these are tough ones. The Hills Have Eyes. Now, the original 1977 Hills Have Eyes was Wes Craven's sophomore feature after Last House on the Left, which is another very difficult movie to watch. Now, Wes Craven did not want to make a horror movie after Last House on the Left because he found it to be a little bit constrictive. He didn't want to be typecast. And this is sort of a unfortunate theme throughout his career. He several times tried to do things outside of the horror genre, but really didn't find success in the way that he wanted to. But he couldn't find funding. He got a job offer from a producer friend to make an exploitation film, and he said, fine, fuck it. So he went to the New York Public Library to find stories that distressed him, which, respect. That's how I do data mining for story ideas, is just read history.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, a lot of people do.
Well, he came across the legend of Alexander Shawnee Bean, who was the head of a Scottish clan in the 16th century, who there were 48 of his family.
Okay.
48 coming from, he and his wife, Black Agnes, as she was known.
Wow.
Not because of her color, but because of her demeanor. Now, so they had just you do the math on the how many branches are on that family tree of 48 people. Now, they were accused by the authorities at the time of entrapping, murdering, and eating over 1,000 people. They were a special military unit was created by King James VI to take them in, and they were executed for the aforementioned murder and eating of people. So this, along with actually a lot of interesting inspirations, the Joad family and from Grapes of Wrath, especially the John Huston's film version. So The Hills Have Eyes is about it's about a nice family, mom, dad, couple of kids, grown kids, in-law and son-in-law and little baby girl. They go out in a camper into the Mojave Desert. Now, this was actually shot in Victorville, California, which you and I have been through several times.
We have. We've seen all the
and
film
it's in
sets.
the Mojave Desert, and it's a wasteland.
Yeah.
So this was a very difficult shoot for everybody. 120 degrees during the day, negative something at night. Really crazy. But now Bob and Ethel Carter are the patriarchs. They're a nice family. They stop off and meet a guy named Fred, who he's kind of sketchy, and they see some weird stuff in there, and he says, hey, why don't you take this shortcut through through the hills, right? So they do, and their tires get punctured. So the father goes back to find Fred, which was at like a way station, and Fred confesses to him like, oh no, I had this kid named Jupiter, and he came out, as he said, sideways. Ouch. Was like a 20-pound baby, and damn near tore his mother in half.
Yikes.
Yeah, so anyway, he tried to beat him with a tire iron as a child because he burned down their house and killed his sister. And he left him in the hills to die in the desert. But guess what? He didn't. He grew up, he stole a woman, and he started a mutant family with children named Mars and Pluto. Get it? Jupiter, Mars, Pluto.
Yeah.
So anyway, lots of stuff happens. It's a very, very brutal film, and it does a pretty amazing job of taking this family, this civilized, genteel family, and turning them into savages to survive.
Yeah.
Now, it memorably stars Michael Berryman in his film. I don't know if it was his debut, but it was definitely his breakout. He is you have definitely seen him. He's quite a distinct looking gentleman. He was born with over 26 birth defects. He has a kind of a dome shaped skull and a lot of deformities. Absolutely lovely gentleman. And has made an incredibly decades-long career of playing in horror movies.
Well, and regular movies, because he was also in Weird Science,
yeah,
where
he's in lots
he
of stuff.
came and he terrorized the party that they were having, and then at the end of it, after the whole kind of curse wore off, he was like, "You have a lovely home."
And he is. love his story. It's so magnificent. He's had such a successful, long-lasting, fruitful, and seemingly like very fun career. But this was the start. He plays Mars, one of the kids. So anyway, trigger warnings in this one. There is sexual assault. It's an early Wes Craven film, so that's kind of standard. Props for casting Dee Wallace. And then, years before Wes Craven did the old switcheroo with Drew Barrymore in Scream, he kind of does the same thing to Dee Wallace, who is the biggest star in the movie. You just sort of assume she's going to make it.
And this is the atomic bomb testing?
Nope.
One?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Now, the deformity of Papa Jupiter, the original sire of the clan, is never explained.
Okay.
You never know why he comes out that way. Now, his father beats him half to death with a tire iron, and then all those years later, he comes back and he brutally murders his dad with a tire iron.
Yeah. I mean, that's typical.
So, but there was something wrong with Jupiter. He was a murderer. He was like the demon baby, but it's not really explained. Now, in the 2006 remake by Alexander Aja, which I highly recommend, is also fucking brutal. It's got Kathleen Quinlan and Ted Levine as the parents, Emily DeRaven and Aaron Stanford as the kids, and Billy motherfucking Drago as Papa Jupiter, although in this version, he's barely in it. Now, both of these movies had to be cut significantly to avoid an X or an NC-17 rating. The remake has been released as an unedited version, which I highly recommend. Now this version,
only if you can handle it. I mean, he
very
highly
raw.
recommends
Yes.
it, but this is like
These movies
very brutal.
contained-
I can't handle it.
For content warnings, they do contain violence against animals, violence against women, violence against children, cannibalism, and extreme graphic violence. But this is a horror podcast, folks. We do not condone nor endorse any of doing these things in real life. This is all plastic and theater nerds, okay? So, anyway, this one has an interesting twist in that the mutations that causes the violence and the antisocial behavior in these people is a direct result of the Trinity bomb testings and the subsequent testings in the New Mexico desert. This one takes place in New Mexico.
So it's like regular people creating these
they were
mutilated
hill
people.
They were hill people that lived simply.
No,
then the
regular people creating the mutations.
Now, originally, these were just hill folk living simple lives, and then the United States government came in and said, fuck y'all, boom, we need to create planet-destroying weapons. And so the idea that all these years later they are crucifying a father and, sexually assaulting people and stealing babies and eating, none of that's good, but they were created by us. And I think that adds quite a bit to the story. Aaron Stanford in particular does a magnificent job in the remake of being just a kind of a nerdy millennial, civilized academic type turning into a savage murder monster by the end of it, because that's how he's going to live, you know? I actually prefer the remake because I think it's a very smart and razor sharp update. The original, of course, is fantastic. But it's decidedly low budget, and you can tell. But the brutality of it is, even after 50 years, very shocking.
Yeah.
The Hills Have Eyes is a true example of the horror of being at the mercy of some people like this, and it's very much. Oh, did you think just because you lived in an apartment in the city that you were safe? Because you're not there anymore, my friend.
What's
now
the
you're
true
here.
Locals versus outsiders.
And the idea that sometimes we can grow to feel very safe in our homes and forget that that's just a small part of the world.
Yeah. Well, that was a twofer.
It was a little bit. Yeah.
A lot of it. My next example is kind of the most exploitative example of the genre, which is Wrong Turn from 2003.
Are we talking Wrong Turn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or the remake?
2003.
Okay.
So it's just Wrong Turn.
Just get a map, you guys. Get a map.
Starring Eliza Dushku, who's from Buffy, Dollhouse, Bring It On. Jeremy Sisto from 6 Feet Under, Law and Order, and I guess the last several seasons of the show FBI, and Desmond Flynn, who's from Dexter, And if you don't know him from Dexter, you will have known him from a bunch of other things.
He's like the kind of smarmy, like, cop that wears chains. And
kind of fucked up, weird teeth, but he's
like
still
Deb's
kind
love
of
interest.
Attractive.
Yeah, he's like wears a pinky ring and shit. Yeah. That kind of guy. Yeah.
Total like good Miami guy. So this basically is about a group of friends and some random traveler. Desmond Flynn isn't part of the group of friends. They get stranded in the middle of the woods after their cars collide when they take a wrong turn. And they discover the real truth about the road they found once they start to figure out how to get themselves out of this situation. The film is definitely a portrayal of the Appalachian people, poverty, isolated in the West Virginia mountains. It's not an accident that they're all there. The murderous cannibal group basically works with the local weird gas station guy with no teeth to get people to take this route because it's easy to get lost. Just like
The Hills Have Eyes, just like Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
It's easy to get lost, so they have kind of this conduit to get them there. And as they start to try to escape, some of them go off in smaller groups, and they find all kinds of abandoned cars and trucks and suitcases and blood everywhere. And they really quickly realize that this is constructed. This is a stop along this road, no matter what.
Yeah.
And it, again, they stumble on this group of hillbillies. Some are taken, some are killed. And you really start to see the flashes and psychological effects that have on inbreeding. It's a real focus on this inbred group. I mean, I think even the characters' names are like Three Finger or Two Tooth. So it's a real like exploitation of the inbred Appalachia, people who are not civilized at all. And it's brutal, and it's a cat and mouse, and it's unrelenting, and it's a constant, like, the reason I'm recommending it is because it's a good example of kind of all of the elements, positive and negative, of hillbilly horror in a pretty tight hour and 30-minute package that is action, 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 action. Who's going to survive? What will it take for people to survive? What will the people who are trying to survive that are quote unquote civilized have to do in order to do this? And you're basically left with a decision as one of these outsiders. Do I destroy all of these people just to survive? And, that question is answered. I did want to say something like, mention something. There's a historian who explained kind of this understanding of what people think, what outsiders think. We know Appalachia exists because we need it to exist in order to define what we are and what we are not. It's the quote other America because of the idea that Appalachia convinces us of the righteousness of our own lives. There's a lot of kind of commentary on civilized society versus inbred society, redneck, backwoods type of characterization here. I would never ever recommend any of the other Wrong Turn movies.
No, like we said,
please don't.
These were during the 2000s era of like frat boy, like, oh, look what I could do, bro. So you get movies like Cabin Fever and,
This one is the kind of the most gentle exploitation of the, hillbilly genre.
Yeah. The first one's the best for sure.
And the rest get so offensive.
And mean.
Extremely offensive.
That's the mean-spirited.
Unnecessarily. Because it doesn't have anything to do with the plot. Because you can see with this film that there's just enough of this kind of understanding that this is kind of the forgotten family and they're doing bad things in the middle of nowhere, Appalachia. And it's kind of this like own isolation, and it's not prevalent. But with the other movies, it's like that's all the woods of West Virginia have to offer. And I think that's really not true and a real misrepresentation. And I would only watch the first.
No,
so I'm only recommending
villains or
Wrong
antagonists.
Turn 1.
Antagonists of any kind are always more interesting when you can sort of understand it. If not relate to, then, I understand why you're doing this. And if the only answer is, look at this guy who had a birth defect, he's evil, fuck you, that sucks. That's lazy crap.
And I would say, so if you want kind of a soft entry into the kind of vibes of the hillbilly horror, from my recommendations anyway, start with Fortress. If you want all of the things represented in hillbilly horror, start with Wrong Turn. And then the in-between of both, I'll talk about last. So what's your next one?
I mean, as always, none of my recommendations should ever be considered soft entries into anything.
No, of course not.
So just quick aside, I'm not going to talk about Texas Chainsaw Massacre because we have talked about that one to death.
But that is obviously
that is
an example.
It's not only like the pinnacle of it, it was the inspiration for so much that came afterwards. It itself has its own kind of checkered franchise. I would posit you're fine just watching the original. The one I'd like to talk about, it's, I never see it mentioned. I truly enjoyed it, and it's by a director who really hasn't done much since. This is 2013's Jugface, directed by Chad Crawford Kinkle, excuse me. Now, this movie...
Crawford or Kinkle?
No, Chad Crawford Kinkle.
Oh, okay.
That's his name. Maybe that's why he didn't direct more movies. You should have fixed that one. So, this has a really great cast of familiar faces to fans of indie horror. We've got Sean Bridgers, Lauren Ashley Carter, Larry Fessenden, and then, just out of nowhere, Sean Young. Yeah. And I do want to be clear, this is 2013 Sean Young, so yes. Yeah, she's wild. Anyway, this movie, it's a trend that you find. There's the podcast Old Gods of Appalachia. You find it in the writings of like Brian Hodge. He wrote a magnificent novella called "I Will Bring You the Birds from Out of the Sky." It's a mashup of Appalachian horror and cosmic Lovecraftian horror.
Oh.
So the idea of, because those mountains, the Appalachian Mountains, are older than organic life.
Yep.
They have existed since before microbial life itself. So they're billions of years old. They weren't always located there, but the Appalachian range, I believe, is one of the two oldest existing mountain ranges on planet Earth. So it's one of the oldest spots on Earth. And there is this idea of, eldritch gods, of ancient beings, things beyond our understanding. And my goodness, do I love that mashup. I love the idea of Appalachia and of American heritage and history, not heritage, fuck that word, American history and pre-colonial history tied up with like Precambrian history, basically. So
neat.
Anyway, this is about a rural community, like totally cut off. It's basically a cult. They worship a pit in the ground, a maw, if you will, that heals people and keeps them all alive as long as you sacrifice someone to it every once in a while. Now, there's a guy there named Dwight who he makes he makes clay jugs.
Jug face.
Yes, and in the jugs is a face. Now, whoever's face that is gets sacrificed.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's, people, it's like, they're honored to do it, but they're also scared. So Lauren Ashley Carter plays Ada, and she finds the jug, the newest jug, because Dwight is he's old and doesn't understand kind of like what he's making. He's if I remember correctly, he's blind. So like she assists him with it. His next jug is her, so she hides it, and in doing so, she like undoes the pact between the god in the pit and the community. So the next jug that comes out is a guy named Bodhi, who honestly Ada was supposed to be married to, although she's been sort of fucking her brother on the side because it's that kind of community. But so because they have sacrificed the wrong person, Bodhi, it was supposed to be Ada, everything goes wrong.
Yeah.
The village
sounds like it.
Exactly. Like the people start getting murdered, the people start going insane, the village dies. Ada, kind of gets found out, and it's a little gross.
We don't need every plot detail.
Anyway, the reason I really, really enjoy this film is it swings to the fences. It's got some pretty wild portrayals. Lauren Ashley Carter's great in everything, always. Every time she pops up in a genre movie, it's fantastic. Sean Bridgers always puts in good work. Larry Fessenden is just as insane as you want him to be. But what this movie does, it's an interesting, original story. The idea of making these clay jugs with people's faces on it, that's so cosmic horror and creepy. Making a pact with the land, a blood pact with the land, that's a very old concept. It's and the history of Appalachia, the origin of it, it's mostly Irish immigrants. It's why that music has an Irish twang to it, because a lot of the early settlers were from Ireland. So that mix of old pagan religion. Jugface it's a low budget movie. It just has some truly unique ideas. I think it's executed fairly well. I absolutely think for someone looking for a hillbilly flavored horror movie that is very much unlike the sort of standard trope of city folks getting murdered by hillbillies, this is the one, because it all takes place within this community. It's all these people.
Awesome.
Yeah. Jugface.
Well, my last one is probably the best, I would say, most recent movie exemplifying this kind of concept of hillbilly horror. But we're going to get on a plane real quick, and we're going to go across the pond to the UK, because this is where it takes place. And it's called Eden Lake.
Yikes.
From 2008. And it's starring Kelly Riley, Michael Fassbender, and Jack O'Connell, who it's kind of early in his career. He had done This Is England before this film. But in this particular film, Eden Lake, he was only 18, and he is so frightening in this movie.
I mean, he's got this year alone, he was in 28 Years Later and Sinners.
So if you think about him in those movies, which now he's in his mid 30s, and so like 28 years later, he's pretty intense.
He's a droog.
And brutal. He is a droog. This is him at 18, and he is a sociopath, a sadist. I don't know
sadist is good. Yeah.
Else to describe it. Yeah. So a teacher Jenny, played by Kelly Riley, and her real estate developer boyfriend Steve, played by Michael Fassbender, decide to take a romantic remote lake vacation away. He's planning to propose, and it's the Eden Lake development, which his company is behind, and there's no stop at a gas station warning people away. The only subtle thing where things aren't going to go well for them is when they pull into the Eden Lake turn. And it's very remote. They have GPS in the car. It's kind of hard to get to. On the back of the development billboard, it says, stay out, you fucking corporate slags, or something like that.
Slags. I love that word.
I mean, I'm paraphrasing, and that's not what it says, but basically that's what it says.
Still a great word.
And there's strange, encounters with some locals. when Steve and Jenny are just on the beach, they encounter some local unruly kids and they start to kind of torment them. Their dog poops right near where they're laying. They have the tires in their car slashed. And Michael Fassbender's pissed and he goes to kind of say, they eventually steal the car and he's like, I want the car back. Just give me the keys. Like he's taking his wallet, his watch, his phone. Just give me the car keys back. And one of the kids takes out a knife. And these kids are like between, I would say, 15 and 17. And one of the kids takes out a knife, wrestles a little bit with Michael Fassbender, and he ends up accidentally killing the dog. And Jack O'Connell's character gets very upset. That's his like dog.
Yep.
And he's really upset. So then he goes out on this hunt to torment and kill Jenny and Steve. And they do a pretty damn good job of tormenting and hunting and torturing. And there's...
Oh, yeah, that's the thing is they don't want to kill him, at least at first, because they could just kill them.
And some of the kids are like, we can't do this. I don't want to do this. But the ringleader, Jack O'Connell, is like, nope, you're going to have to slice his tongue out.
He's a really good ringleader.
He's a really good ringleader.
He leads a lot of rings.
And, this kind of is known as British hoodie horror. It's kind of the hillbilly horror genre in the UK. It's isolated, often inbred, but sometimes like violent families that stick together and cover up each other's crimes, typically
like
associated with Britain's Broken Britain Society, in the decay of that kind of those challenges of these rural, isolated,
what commonly known
countryside
as the
places.
legacy of Maggie Thatcher.
Yeah. And again, like I said, it's middle-class couple travels to a pristine remote lake, but it's in this kind of idyllic town that is kept very isolated. And the ending, it's not a happy ending. It's a brutal ending. It's grim, and it's interesting that it reveals this kind of systemic problem where adults condone and enable children's violence.
Yep.
And I think it's really an interesting commentary and twist on the hillbilly horror, because you don't just get to be an adult who tortures outsiders if you weren't once a kid.
No.
That saw that happening or participated in that happening.
Adults.
So it's like a generational violent exchange of this new generation is coming up to protect this idyllic town from outsiders.
Yeah. Adults of violence, they do one of two things. They send their children to fight wars for them that they won't fight, or they train them to be the soldiers that replace them, just locking them in a cycle of violence that never ends.
Well, there's another option too. Sometimes they turn away from them. So anywho, that is Eden Lake, which I would say is probably one of the highest quality of the recommendations that I mentioned. It's pretty impressive because, you have a really good cast. And honestly, Jack O'Connell's acting in this film is amazing.
Well, this has certainly been the year for him, and I know that his character is, I believe, the primary antagonist, or very heavily
Bone
feared.
Temple.
Yeah, in the Bone Temple. So he just popped in right at the end. His character at the beginning, but Jack O'Connell at the end.
He really is a chameleon, because he's a little unrecognizable in some of his other roles. He was in Lady Chatterley's Lover a couple years ago, and I guess did really well in that, and has been in some other. He was in that Unbroken movie, the Laura Hillebrand, about the runner who went to war.
I mean, I remember Skins and This Is England, because it was like the
right.
2000s like rebellious British counterculture, and that's when I was in my 20s, so I really like that shit.
Yeah, that's really where that like the hoodie, the hoodie horror.
Hoodlums, yeah, hooligans.
You could also, one more thing is just if you want the trope split turned up on its head, is watch Tucker and Dale versus Evil, where they're mistaken for the hillbilly murderers.
And they're the good guys.
And by the outside teenagers.
You know what, folks?
Which is a real interesting twist.
Honestly, if you just want to be happy for a night, if you just want to have a good time and feel good and watch something that is like wholesome and lovely and wonderful and graphically violent, Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Just always, don't even need an excuse. Always watch that movie.
It's not even exploitive. It's just really funny.
It's so, Alan Tudyk is so fucking funny.
It's great. It's a great one.
Tyler something. He's great. Oh, I need to remember his name because he's so good. He was also in that doctor show that you like, New Amsterdam, right? Tyler Labine.
Oh yeah,
that's him, Tyler Labine. He's fantastic.
I don't want it out there that I liked New Amsterdam.
He's in that
That's
doctor
not great
show
of a show
that no one named you liked.
I like The Pit.
Look, it's no Dr. Odyssey.
Oh, I miss you, Dr. Odyssey.
At least they gave him burial at sea.
Who's gonna be the dad?
Well, this has been Hillbilly Horror, everybody. I hope y'all grab y'all banjo, rustle on up
and
down the holler.
Two.
And keep an eye out for any city folk, because you know what you got to do when they come into your places. You got to pop out their tires and then crucify them and then set them on fire to lure the rest of the family out. And then
don't trust a shortcut.
You have to go into the camper and assault everybody and steal the baby and then bring the baby back.
You don't have to do any of that. But listen to the podcast and join us next week for our next Octerrorfest.
Bye.